My husband is bald. He always wears wigs. We had an argument about money, and I insulted him, calling him a bald man. He left home for 3 days now and hasn't returned. Is he really that childish? The man Alara married was named Julian Vance, a brilliant architect, meticulous to the point of neurosis. He wasn't just handsome, he was a statue of cool competence, a persona meticulously built on the foundation of his custom-made, high-density hair system. No one, absolutely no one outside of me knew that beneath that perfectly styled silver crown lay a polished, naked scalp. It was our secret, our small, strange intimacy. I'm Alara. I'm a high-end interior designer, which is just a fancy way of saying I know how to make money look good, even when it's borrowed. I'm 38, 3 years younger than Julian, and I thought I was pragmatic, a realist. I was the financial watchdog of this marriage, the one who kept the books balanced while Julian chased the grandeur. I built the perfect home, but Julian built the perfect lie, and now I was starting to see the cracks in the foundation. If you're watching this, subscribe and let me know where you're watching from. The tension started months ago, not with his vanity, but with our bank account. Our life in the sleek Seattle high-rise felt less like a home and more like a gilded cage built on debt. We were fighting about a missing $30,000 transfer, an amount too large to be a mistake, too small to ruin us, but significant enough to reveal a fissure in the rock of our trust. His usual composure was cracking, replaced by a defensive wall I couldn't penetrate. He kept repeating the same flimsy excuse about a bond investment, but the numbers felt dead in my hands, inert and lying. That night, the humid air of the argument finally ignited. I was tired, furious, and looking for the one button I knew would blow up his curated world. He deserved the heat, but I didn't yet know he was already wearing a full suit of emotional armor. The argument escalated into a cold war of whispers, each word a shard of ice. He was pacing near the floor-to-ceiling window, the city lights reflecting in the fake sheen of his hair. When he finally dismissed my concerns about the money with a wave of his hand, calling my anxiety provincial, something snapped. I looked straight at that impeccable hairline, that symbol of his fabricated perfection, and hurled the words I knew I could never take back. Go on, then. Get rid of that ridiculous toupee, bald man. It's as fake as your bond statement. The silence that followed was terrifying, heavier than any shout. The color drained from his face, leaving his skin the shade of plaster. He didn't look angry. He looked fatally wounded. It wasn't the insult that crushed him, I realized. It was the public exposure of his deepest, most meticulously guarded insecurity. He didn't say a word. He walked with unnerving calm to the master closet, retrieved a small, dark duffel bag, and packed only the essentials: cash, his passport, and a handful of credit cards, the ones he kept hidden from my scrutiny. When he left, the heavy steel door closed, not with a slam of rage, but with the quiet finality of a lock clicking into place, severing something precious. He was gone, not for an hour, but for 3 long days and nights, and with him, the truth about the $30,000 vanished into the city's indifferent expanse. I knew this wasn't about a wig anymore. It was about the lie that held us together. The first day, I was smug. Let him sulk. Let the pampered prince face the real world without a security blanket of a perfect life. By the second day, the smugness had curdled into a tight, acid knot of worry. The phone calls went straight to voicemail. I tried his architect firm, Vance & Associates, pretending to be a major client. The secretary, a woman with a voice as dry as parchment, simply stated, "Mr. Vance is taking an unscheduled leave of absence. All projects are being handled by Mr. Sterling." Unscheduled leave. That sounded final, professional, and terrifyingly cold. He hadn't just stormed out. He had vanished with administrative precision. The apartment, once a symbol of our success, now felt like a mausoleum of my own making. Every shadow seemed to hold an echo of my harsh words. I couldn't sleep. The city's noise, which I usually filtered out, was now a constant grating reminder of his absence. I'd jump up at the slightest sound, a car backfiring, the elevator bell, convinced it was the click of his keys in the walk. It wasn't just guilt anymore. It was a deepening, chilling suspicion. Julian didn't run from an insult. He ran from exposure. And the magnitude of his reaction suggested the $30,000 wasn't the biggest secret I had unknowingly threatened to uncover. My anger at his vanity was quickly being replaced by a terrifying curiosity about his hidden life. On the fourth morning, desperation drove me to his private study, a room I rarely entered, respecting its sacred barrier of creative genius. This time, I didn't care about respect. I was hunting. I went straight for the safe, disguised as a series of classical architecture texts. I knew the combination. Our anniversary. A detail I was certain he'd never change. Inside, the safe was nearly empty, holding only a single expensive Swiss timepiece and a small, folded piece of paper secured with an ornate paperclip. It wasn't a love letter or a confession. It was a printed confirmation of a domain name registration. The domain was cryptic. It meant absolutely nothing to me. But the date of registration was 6 months before we were married. A lifetime ago, in Julian's meticulous chronology. Why register a secret website domain before starting a life with me? My fingers flew across the keyboard. The website itself was a blank canvas, password protected, with only a tiny, stylized logo featuring an abstract silver coil. I tried every password I could think of. His mother's name, his first pet, my name backwards. Nothing worked. But the existence of this digital vault, this cold, empty space predating our marriage, convinced me that the issue was not the $30,000, and certainly not the bald joke. It was the elaborate scaffolding of a secret life he was now forced to protect. A secret he clearly felt was worth abandoning me for. I called our only mutual friend, Marcus, who was like a younger brother to Julian. Marcus was a charming, slightly frantic investment banker who admired Julian almost pathologically. I kept my voice light, casual, saying Julian was away on an emergency trip to San Francisco and had forgotten a crucial financial file. I just need the name of his local contact there, Marcus, so I can overnight it. Marcus hesitated. His usual easy chatter replaced by nervous throat clearing. San Francisco? No, Alara, that can't be right. Julian doesn't handle the West Coast accounts, and he mentioned he was heading out toward Lake Tahoe for a personal retreat to clear his head after the big New York pitch. Bingo. Julian lied about the location, and Marcus, with his sloppy loyalty, had just provided the correct vector. Lake Tahoe, a personal retreat. That sounded like a place to disappear with intent, to hibernate and plan his next move. A change in the financial narrative was the biggest tell. Julian was always pedantic about business travel. The New York pitch was a lie. He'd been home all week. My initial guilt evaporated, replaced by a surge of pure, ice-cold resolve. He wasn't sulking. He was hiding. And I was going to follow the scent of his betrayal all the way to the Sierra Nevada mountains. The hunt was officially on. So, all about pretend time put into context and quotations. Before leaving, I needed ammunition. I spent the next hour deep diving into our shared accounts, looking for any recent, unusual activity. My eyes locked onto a withdrawal. Not the missing $30,000, which remained a mystery, but a series of small, repetitive payments totaling nearly $10,000 over the past year, all made to a single, anonymous online vendor listed only as Rent 789. The payments were always exactly $833.33, deducted on the first of every month like clockwork rent. This wasn't Julian's usual meticulous payment structure. It was too cheap for a Seattle storage unit and too consistent to be anything but a retainer or a lease. PPP, I cross-referenced the recurrent payment amount with real estate prices in the Tahoe area. $833.33 per month perfectly matched the low end, year-round rental rate for a small cabin or a garage apartment on the Nevada side of the lake, in the quieter, more isolated areas. The realization hit me like a physical blow. Julian hadn't just run away, he had been preparing a contingency escape route for months, renting a quiet bolt hole, a place where he could exist as the man without the wig, the man without the facade of the perfect life. He had been planning to leave me, not just escape my anger. The insult about his hair was merely the convenient ignition for a bomb he had already built. I emptied the joint account of every cent I could safely liquidate without triggering an immediate bank alert, leaving just enough for the bills to clear. The total was nearly $45,000. It wasn't the missing $30,000, but it was enough to sustain my own hunt. I rented a nondescript SUV in a color Julian would never associate with me, a dusty, forgettable gray, and made the grueling 13-hour drive to Tahoe, fueled by caffeine and the relentless loop of his betrayal in my mind. The drive was agonizing. Every billboard, every rest stop felt like a judgment. I had loved him, deeply, passionately. I had loved the meticulous man, the sensitive man, who let me into his secret world of insecurity. Now I saw him only as a masterful deceiver, a chess player, moving his pieces while I remained a pawn, blind to the game. When I finally hit the winding roads overlooking the massive, cobalt blue lake, the beauty felt obscene, a mockery of my internal devastation. He was here, enjoying this tranquility, while I was shattered in Seattle. The serenity of the mountains only hardened my resolve. I wasn't here to beg him back. I was here to find out who or what he was protecting, and then to ensure the life he was trying to build with his secrets would collapse under the weight of my revenge. Tahoe City was buzzing with late-season tourists, but I focused on the quiet, residential roads skirting the lake. I drove slowly, checking every mailbox for the telltale sign of the anonymous $833.33 rental. It took nearly 5 hours of painstaking searching before I found it, a small, weathered cabin, almost entirely obscured by ancient pines, with a mailbox marked only V.E. on a remote, unpaved lane. The letter V for Vance, and E for Ilara. No, that was too brazen. Perhaps a middle name or a new identity. I parked the SUV a quarter-mile down the road and proceeded on foot, slipping into the shadow of the trees. The cabin had a faded blue trim, smoke curling lazily from the chimney, a domestic, cozy scene that stabbed me with jealousy. Julian's black luxury sedan, the one he claimed was in the shop, was parked discreetly behind the cabin. He was here. He was warm. He was safe. I settled into a thicket of scrub oak, pulling out a pair of binoculars I'd bought in a panic at a sporting goods store. Through the window, I could see Julian, but he wasn't alone. My breath hitched, sharp and painful. Julian was sitting by a roaring stone fireplace, but he wasn't wearing his usual crisp shirt or even a t-shirt. He was wearing a soft, gray cable-knit sweater, and his head was bare, completely undeniable bald. He looked different, younger, softer, and heartbreakingly vulnerable. But it was the man sitting across from him that made my blood run cold. The second man was younger, leaner, with shaggy dark hair and a casually familiar air. They were leaning over a massive set of blueprints spread across a rustic coffee table, their heads close together. They weren't just colleagues. The level of physical intimacy, the way Julian would occasionally rest his hand on the younger man's arm while pointing at a detail, was unmistakable. My mind raced, trying to catalog this intruder. He wasn't Marcus. He wasn't any of Julian's business partners, and he certainly wasn't a client. He was simply too comfortable, too deeply embedded in Julian's private, hairless sanctuary. The betrayal wasn't just financial, and it wasn't just about the lie of the wig. It was a secret emotional life that had been meticulously shielded by the perfection of our marriage. The $30,000 and the bald joke were mere noise, distractions from the main performance. P-brack, P-brack, P-brack-nor, P-brack, B-R-A. I watched them for 2 hours, every minute an agonizing slice of my life being rewritten before my eyes. They weren't fighting. They were collaborating, laughing easily over some detail on the blueprints. Finally, the younger man stood up to pour them both a drink. As he moved, I caught a glimpse of his face in the light. He had Julian's eyes, the same striking, intense blue. And then I saw the name embroidered in subtle white stitching on his shirt cuff. A. Vance. Julian had never mentioned a sibling, a cousin, or any distant relative named Vance starting with an A. The blood relationship was obvious, yet utterly impossible, given Julian's carefully constructed narrative of being an only child of elderly parents. Who was this A. Vance? The pieces began to violently connect. The hidden domain, the secret cabin rental, the $30,000 missing funds, and the lie about the West Coast travel. Julian wasn't having an affair. He was building a legacy, a dynasty, with a person he had deliberately excised from his marriage and his main life. Likely a son he had fathered before we met, or perhaps conceived during a momentary lapse of fidelity years ago. This was not a betrayal of passion. It was a cold, calculated betrayal of family and legacy. I needed proof, something undeniable that spoke to the years of deception. I knew Julian kept a small, antique dictaphone for recording late-night architectural ideas. It was an object he cherished. That night, under the cover of a thick Tahoe fog, I crept back to the cabin. The lock was simple, a standard residential deadbolt that succumbed easily to the lock-picking skills I'd picked up in my rebellious college days. Inside, the cabin was suffocatingly warm, smelling of pine smoke and damp wool. I moved silently to the small desk. There it was, the dictaphone. I quickly ejected the microcassette and replaced it with a blank one. I crept back out, shaking violently, and sped away before anyone noticed the barely disturbed snow on the porch. Back in the safety of my rental car, I hit play. The tape wasn't about blueprints. It was Julian's voice, raw and unpracticed, talking to the young man, A. Vance. He was outlining the entire scheme. The $30,000 was the initial seed money for a new revolutionary firm they were launching. A firm intended to be a direct rival to his current partners. He was funding his son's career behind my back, using my future security. The insult about his baldness was the perfect cover for his sudden planned disappearance to finalize the launch. The betrayal was complete. The next morning, I drove into Reno, the nearest city where I could acquire the tools for the next phase of my plan. I wasn't going to call the police, and I wasn't going to file for divorce. That would be too quick, too clean, and too beneficial to Julian. His revenge needed to be architectural, as meticulous and devastating as his own betrayal. My weapon of choice would be the very thing he sought to protect, his professional reputation and his relationship with his new heir. I purchased a sophisticated, highly directional parabolic microphone and a small, undetectable tracking chip. I also bought a cheap burner phone and a new SIM card. I spent the afternoon at a library, creating a new, untraceable email address. My plan was simple. I would gather proof of his illegal financial maneuverings, the kind that would get him blacklisted in the high-stakes world of Seattle real estate, and then feed it anonymously to his current firm's largest, most vindictive competitor. But first, I had to sow the seeds of suspicion between Julian and his son. The key to the kingdom, the final move, lay in that password-protected domain. I returned to the cabin that evening, armed with the new tools. I knew Julian and A. Vance went into town every night around 7 for dinner at the only decent steakhouse. I had a narrow window. This time, I didn't break in. Instead, I carefully affixed the small tracking chip to the underside of Julian's sedan near the license plate. Then, using a small specialized needle, I injected a tiny amount of concentrated, high-strength hair dye, the cheap, drugstore kind, directly into the interior foam of Julian's expensive, custom-made travel case for his wig, which I knew he kept in the trunk. This was the first phase of the psychological attack. The dye wouldn't be visible on the surface, but the next time he took the wig out, the chemical residue would slowly transfer to the interior of the hair system, reacting with the natural oils and the synthetic fibers to create a patchy, uneven, and bizarrely bright orange tint over the next few hours. Julian's ultimate vanity would be ruined, not instantly, but slowly and humiliatingly over the course of an entire evening with his son. The revenge wasn't just physical. It was a public unraveling of his perfect facade, and the orange glow would be a silent, screaming reminder of the words I had thrown at him. Bald man. The second night in the car, watching the glowing orange hue of the fireplace through the window, I worked on the final puzzle, the password for the domain website. It was too personalized to be random. I went back to the only real clue I had, his baldness. He viewed it as his greatest vulnerability, the thing that prevented him from being the perfect man. What would be the opposite of his shame? His ambition. I started listing his architectural firm's biggest, most prestigious projects, linking them to his personal mantras. The silver client. Silver was often used to describe the 25th anniversary. Could it be a date? No. I looked at the logo, a silver coil, a stylized helix. Then I thought of his childhood, the stories he rarely shared. He grew up in an old mining town in Colorado, a town famous for its silver mines, now long abandoned. He was obsessed with leaving that poverty behind. The password, I suddenly realized, wasn't about the client. It was about his own escape. I typed Silver Mine Legacy 99, access granted, period. The website was a financial database, an encrypted ledger, far more sophisticated than anything his current firm used. It was a complete shadow accounting system, detailing every cash payment, every hidden asset, and every illicit kickback Julian had received over the last 15 years, specifically from the shell companies he used to win major municipal bids. The $30,000 wasn't the first hidden amount. It was just the latest transfer. There were millions detailed here, laundered through fake construction supply firms and numbered accounts. But the most damning revelation wasn't the money. It was a series of meticulously archived, anonymous emails that Julian had sent to various professional review boards, anonymously flagging minor, compliance-related errors in the work of his own competitors. The emails were vicious, subtle, and career-destroying. Julian Vance wasn't just a cheat. He was a silent assassin, building his empire by systematically crippling his rivals. And then I saw the final, sickest detail, a recent draft email unsent, titled, Concerns Regarding New Firm Vance & Heir, Potential Ethics Breach. Julian was already planning to betray his son, A. Vance, by using this same tactic to protect himself if their new venture failed. He was a professional betrayer, incapable of loyalty to anyone, even his own blood. I now had everything. The recorded confession on the dictaphone, detailing the $30,000 launch fund, the evidence of the orange-dyed wig, the humiliation, and the complete encrypted ledger of financial crimes and career sabotage, the professional ruin. It was time to execute the final, devastating act of revenge. I downloaded the entire database from https://www.googlesearchqa onto a portable drive. Then, using the burner phone and the library's Wi-Fi, I packaged the information. I sent an anonymous, untraceable email to the CEO of Sterling & Stone, Julian's main, most ruthless competitor, with the subject line, "The real reason Julian Vance left your firm." The email contained the ledger, the list of sabotage emails, and a transcript of the dictaphone recording, including Julian's plan to betray his son. I made sure to include a single final line of text. Look closely at the hair of the man who stabbed you in the back. It's the only real thing about him. Then, I deleted the email account and destroyed the burner phone and the portable drive, leaving no trace of my involvement. /porn backtool end P4. I drove away from Tahoe the same way I arrived, in silence, but now without the suffocating weight of uncertainty. I didn't return to our Seattle apartment. Instead, I drove to the coast, checked into a remote boutique hotel under an assumed name, and waited. Within 48 hours, the news hit the financial press. Julian Vance was under investigation by the Securities and Exchange Commission. His firm was in emergency damage control, and his reputation was in tatters. The competitor, Sterling and Stone, had ensured the news spread like wildfire. A few days later, I saw a grainy photo of him in a small Nevada local paper. Julian was standing outside the cabin, looking bewildered and defeated, his head conspicuously bare. The article mentioned a highly public and physical argument between him and a younger associate, A. Vance, resulting in police being called for a noise complaint. His son had clearly discovered the betrayal. Julian had lost his marriage, his money, his professional standing, and his secret legacy, all within the space of one humiliating, orange-tinged week. I had planned my revenge, executed it perfectly, and achieved complete satisfaction. The only thing left was the chilling, cold reality of my new life. I had avenged the betrayal, but the man I had loved was truly gone, replaced by a ghost of my own making. I smiled, a small, genuine smile of finality, and picked up the phone to call a lawyer. The king was dethroned. My revenge was complete. Click on the next story waiting for you on screen, because trust me, the betrayals only get darker from here.